Today's rally for racial justice has brought thousands of people out to the National Mall in Washington, D.C. After flying over the crowd, President Trump remarked, "Wow, there's like 10 million people down there."
The Republican National Convention wrapped up last night, or rather, it waddled off in a pair of camouflage Walmart Crocs.
Last night was indeed the final night of the Republican National Convention, with President Trump accepting his party's nomination to raucous chants of 4 more years. Unfortunately, he thought that was how long they wanted him to speak.
Devastating wildfires are still raging in California, while 2 tropical storms struck the Gulf Coast in rapid succession. Trump was busy this week. Otherwise, he would have suggested moving the storms west to extinguish the wildfires. My delivery is horrible today.
Do you want to start over?
No.
Well, then finally, earlier this week, Jerry Falwell Jr. stepped down as the president of Liberty University, receiving more than $10 million in severance pay. He's expected to give every dollar of it to his wife, Becky, just so long as she lets him watch her spend it. The Trump Report starts now. Welcome to the post-RNC edition of the Trump Report. I'm Christian Blatt, and delivering the funny in her own way, Tamra Brown. I had no problem with. I had no issues with the delivery, but
I was really fun, like making those punch lines have the least punch possible.
They're more slap lines. And also with us, the one, the only, Scott Moore. Well, we did it.
Hey.
We made it through a week of the Republican National Convention, which I did think it was funny that in the day where he criticized the NBA for their low ratings, we found out that the every night of the RNC was lower than the comparable night of the DNC. You don't think that actually means anything except to Donald Trump. I think that's the guy who's like, that's got to drive him crazy. He's like, I don't read the Fast Nationals. I need to see the Nielsen's. I need the weekend. And also, interestingly, last night's ratings were lower than the night before. So more people wanted to see Mike Pence than wanted to see.
I think that only makes sense.
Yeah, exactly.
In general, Republicans, I mean, don't you agree? They like Mike Pence better than they like Donald Trump.
Absolutely. I think that the hundreds of former staffers for previous Republican presidents and other prominent Republicans who are all coming out in favor of voting for Joe Biden. I think if Pence was the nominee, they're like, well, he's not my favorite, but look at Mike Pence. When you think of a Republican, who looks more like a Republican than Mike Pence? I can't think of anyone.
Right. We joked about this before, like if we were doing a central casting and we were casting for generic Republican politicians, that it would be Mike Pence, just middle-aged, silver-haired. It's just, he fits the whole generic look of the generic Republican politician,
And then he starts talking about the issues that are important to him, and you're like, oh, yeah, he's our guy. So overall thoughts on the fun-filled RNC week, where I think, I haven't actually seen the statistic, Tamra, but I believe 45% of the speakers had the last name Trump throughout the entire weekend. And Kimberly Guilfoyle, eventually we know she's going to be Kimberly Guilfoyle Trump Jr. or some of that.
Trump Jr.
Yeah. And I don't know if she wants to bring back, the Newsom last name just to hold it over him. But what do you think of a week of RNC, Tamra?
I am extremely disappointed because they did a good job. I was hoping that they were going to. I was hoping it was going to be this terrible disaster of technical difficulties and slipped, accidental slip-ups and just clearly shallow. Fear-mongering, and they actually did a good job doing what they were trying to do. They really were trying to appeal to the Republicans that might feel, not as comfortable with their party as they should, really appealing to them, really appealing to the Republicans who are staunch Republicans, but don't like Donald Trump and things about him, and trying to make Donald Trump more appealing to them. They really got their shit together, and just I paused for a second saying, like, can we use that word on YouTube? But
I don't know. I'll have to check.
Mm,
At least this isn't Chinese
sorry.
TikTok, but I think we can get away with it. Yeah.
But they really surprised me at their ability to be competent.
Sure. I mean, I understand that. I mean, you have to figure that to some extent, it's kind of like the band that has the disappointing album come out. So then on their next tour, they just play their entire greatest hits album or their most popular album front to back. This was basically the Mission Impossible 3. People don't remember how bad Mission Impossible 2 was because there's been 7 of them. But it's really bad, the John Woo one. But then Mission Impossible 3, they bring in J.J. Abrams and you're like, oh, this is great. This is why I love Ethan Hunt. So this was like, hey, you remember the Republican Party? You remember what's important to us? We're not really going to talk about most of that. But, Trump, he's our guy right now. I know he's nobody's favorite, but he's the guy who's probably going to win. So we just need all of you to, just do us a solid and make sure you vote for him at least twice. So I definitely think that they definitely played the hits. And I think putting Trump as front and center, it's like you are going to sink or swim with him. And of course,
and if
looks,
you
know that he'll sink if he were to go.
If you listened to just messaging alone, it could have easily been like for a large part of it, I think that they were trying to give a democratic message by how hard they were trying to hit diversity and look what we do for the Black community, despite their actual performance completely negating what they were saying. Just going by the words that were coming out of their mouth, they were giving a Democratic message, not a Republican message.
Yeah, no, I can definitely see some of that. Scott, your overall thoughts before we start diving into it.
Well, like Tamra said, I think they actually did better than 2016. And I know we talked about this last Friday where I was saying it's going to be dark and dark and dark. And it was talking about, socialism running rampant and mobs taking over the country. But they really tried to put the sunnier spin on Donald Trump and the Republicans, like they were saying. And the point is they know they don't have to go after a big tent kind of strategy. And the Democrats are going after that big tent strategy last week. They're only going after what they have to do to peel off that very slim win again. So they were doing all they could, like going after the minority vote, the Black vote. They're saying, okay, we know we're not going to win the Latino vote, the Black vote. But if we can peel off a few of those voters, especially like Latino men that might be interested in law and order and protection of their family, if we can peel off a few Black voters, if we can peel off a few of those in those strategic areas of the swing states, if we can get the quote unquote suburban housewife, in case someone's listening to this and not seeing my air quotes, if they want to get some of those suburban housewives that are concerned, that are, moderate Republican women, but they again have been turned off by Donald Trump and what he's been saying, this was an opportunity to maybe get a few of those women to come back home and to be able to vote Republican, and to give permission for them. And by creating this somewhat separate reality of what's actually happening in the world. But again, that's the point of a convention on either party. It's to just be an infomercial and talk about how great they are. So doing those things they had to do. And of course, they had the great trappings of the incumbency, where beyond the Hatch Act violations and other things that are ethically maybe inappropriate, they took advantage of everything of the trappings of incumbency between the White House, the Rose Garden, Fort McHenry, all the places that you could do to really bring that power there and show the power of what they have in the trappings of the presidency. So in that sense, they did pull off a very good convention.
Yeah, and to your point about trying to bring women back home, considering which convention this is, what you're trying to say is that they're trying to bring women back home and directly into the kitchen. But I do understand what you're saying. That is the message that is out there. And yeah, look, I think I was reading Frank Luntz's thoughts, and obviously he's the pollster of choice of Fox News, but he also is very astute when it comes to these things. He's like, look, you can argue about whether or not it was legal that they did this at the White House and they did all that stuff, but for the spectacle, for the show of putting on an actual program, it's exactly what they wanted. It's exactly what they needed.
Mhm.
Honestly, this is better than if he was able to do it at a stadium in Jacksonville, which was
Right.
not that long ago. That's what this was going to be. It's like, really? So where the Jaguars play, this is going to be a big moment. And look, the whole night was really just about the fireworks at the end that said Trump 2020, which was great because I think it was Lester Holt and Savannah Guthrie is who I happened to be watching, and you could see them. They were like trying not to laugh when it spelled out. It's like, oh, and there's his name, and 2020. So I thought that was interesting. So I think that they did a good job of putting everything into place, and then he fucking drones on for 70 minutes. Where even he is bored of his speech at the end. He's clutching onto the podium. At first, I didn't think anybody was commenting on this. He was so sweaty, and I'm like,
Orange.
no one's tweeting about this. But then I dug a little. I actually typed in the keyword Trump sweaty, and I'm like, okay, no wait, everybody's talking about it. Just wasn't the people on my feed at the moment.
If anybody would have been sweating up there, what I was shocked at is I kept looking for like orange on his collar.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I can't, they must have, I was like, they must have put some sort of wax on his collar so that, because they knew he'd be sweating. I just,
No, I think they injected in his daily hydroxychloroquine now. I think that the orange just goes directly into him. So he
Right on the surface of the skin.
No fuss, no muss, no splashing. But look, I think that we'll talk in a moment about some of the things that they did very effectively, especially some of the speakers that they had who were the non-Trump family, non-political speakers. I think that some of that was very effective. And I was hoping to get an answer to this from Larry Sabato at the Center for Politics at the University of Virginia, because to me, I don't know how effective any convention is, because one, pretty much these guys are so different. The country is what it is. The majority of people know who they're voting for, and they're not going to change their mind over the next 3 months. Also, most people didn't watch last night, any nights this week, or last week. I think the majority of, and we're not talking about average Americans, we're talking about people who vote, which is, what is it? Is it 51%? Or it's not even that many people vote, right? It's the half of the population who's going to vote. Not even that many of them watch it. So I don't know how effective it is. But in terms of putting on the show that they wanted to, yeah, but I don't know how well he delivered. He had the crowd that he wanted, but even he, like I said, he just seemed like there's a point in the middle. Like when he started, the gas tank already had the little picture of the gas tank, so you knew that he was going to have to stop off at some point. And he was just on fumes at the end, and he's like, yeah, God bless America. All right, here's the fireworks, and it was just like, I really didn't expect that to be the end.
well,
I was
Christian,
like,
he can't do a bump of Adderall on television.
Right.
And so after 20 minutes,
I mean, clearly his son did a few nights
Energizer
before.
Bunny winds down until he gets a little.
Both his son and Kimberly Guilfoyle clearly were. And by the way, it's a little bit of a very specific reference, but there is a great meme of Don Jr. from his speech, and it's a quote from Die Hard, and it says, "Hans, Booby, I'm your white knight," and that is, of course, this character Ellis, who we see do coke and try and sweet talk the terrorists. And I'm like, yes, Donald Jr. is Ellis from Die Hard. So I don't know. I mean, I think that it's not like a disaster for Trump's speech. That was the one in Oklahoma City where I think he was rattled, because he's like, there's like a quarter of the people here that I was told. This one, he knew it was going to be whatever it was, 1,500. 1,500, you can call them spectators. You might call them carriers. We'll see in a couple of weeks, what that meant there. But what did you think of the speech itself, Tamra? You're just taking it in a vacuum, which people who did watch probably only saw some of that speech. I think there's a lot of people who didn't watch anything other than like, oh, I'll see Trump speak.
For a Donald Trump speech, I thought it was outstanding. For his usual, going off the cuff, not finishing a sentence, his little asides. I thought he stuck to the prompt teleprompter. He stuck to the points. He finished a thought. I mean, as far as what Donald Trump's speech giving, as far as that goes, I thought he did a great job. And I really, I mean, I think I disagree with you in that I think this, the convention as a whole is really going to improve Trump in the polls. That's what that's what scares me about this week, is that that's how it felt to me. I think he did a good job. You know, that level of preparedness on the part of Trump, who we know doesn't like to study. I heard some commentators saying, like, now moving forward, having to go to the rallies that he's immediately going off to, is he going to be able to maintain that level of professionalism? You know, that remains to be seen. But I really think his performance last night and throughout the convention, you know, giving the citizens that were receiving their becoming naturalized citizens, like, that was pre-taped, but you know, just every appearance at the convention that we saw of him was the best Donald Trump that there is. And so it's very hard for me to say, but I think as far as that's what I mean. Like, as far as what they were trying to achieve, they nailed it.
On the whole, Scott, what did you think of Trump's speech last night?
Yeah, I have to agree with Tamra there. I think again, it was so not Trump-like that he was able to stay on the script the entire time. He didn't really deviate. I took it slightly different, though. I took it as the fact that he knew, after how well Biden did last week, that he too had to hit this out of the ballpark, and he couldn't get off script because he's not winning in the polls right now. And what Tamara was saying is true. They were trying to make the best look of Donald Trump again for this entire week, to, you know, overlook all the other issues that you have with him. I mean, even when Blanca came out and was talking about, oh, his tweets may be unfiltered, you know, like really trying to gloss over all the negative things about him and just focus on all these great things, and then pretend like, you know, it was like a weird dichotomy of like, oh, we're anti-immigrant, we're, you know, law and order, but then you're also having the immigration ceremony, you're having all these other things to try to like be the opposite. And it kind of goes back to what Tamara was saying earlier about, oh, they're trying to pick up on some Democratic Party ideals. But he knew he had to do as well or better than Joe Biden did last week, because Joe Biden had such an incredible speech. And I think for his perspective and for Republicans, he did what he needed to do again to go after his base, to give those people again that permission that might have felt like they were wandering away from him because of some of his other issues, to be able to basically come home again. But it was too long on the flip side, and a lot of people that might have been interested, including Donald Trump, kind of were at the end like, okay, let's wrap this up. It just went very long, you know, talking about, even from the beginning, you went on the different presidents that had been there, and you were talking about, you know, the manifest destiny, which, you know, it was just a lot of different things in there that could have been tightened up a bit. But yeah, they did what they needed to do, I think, for their base. And going back to what I said earlier, to be able to give a few of those people, they know they're not going to get everybody. They just need to get a few of those people to come back over to hopefully cross the finish line with another set of inside slider win like he did in 2016. And that's all they care about.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that there are a lot of moments in the speech that are effective. I think burying it in 70 minutes, that really the first 20 were a lot of ramp up, and I feel like you definitely lost people, especially when it went so late for the East Coast. But I do think a lot of people will consume it in terms of little snippets after the fact as well. So, you know, that it almost doesn't matter, even if it had been an hour. And, well, it was an hour and 10 minutes, 2 hours and 10 minutes. But I think the thing that is very effective is to just the way that you paint Biden, which is that, look, this is what's going on. Look what's happening in these Democratic cities. Look at what they're not doing. Look at the rioting that's happening here, which is interesting because there was no reference to the shooting in Kenosha, Wisconsin, but there was a lot of focus on the rioting. And I think that's rioting that has a cause and effect that I think most people will see why that's happening. The fact that they're in the 90th day of rioting in Portland, of all places, Portland, I think that is the sort of thing that has people scared. And look, crime in big cities, big blue cities like New York City, are way up. And I think it is very easy, without even going so far to, create scary pictures. You can just be like, yeah, here's some stuff that's going on. You're going to see more of it. And I do think Biden did have a good comeback to that, which was, he is the president right now. I haven't done any of this. He's done all of this has happened while he's president. And I think that it definitely, it's very effective for them to paint a picture for your average Americans. And yes, very specifically, your average white, certainly middle class Americans who are going to be scared of some of the things that they see on the news. And, maybe they are annoyed that the NBA decided to not play in Major League Baseball, and all these things happen as a result of that. And, there are people that are just like, yeah, you know what? Politics is too political. So they could sort of see overlooking a lot of what Trump is. And like Tamra, I think you mentioned what Ivanka said, or I think whichever one of you said that. But Ivanka's like, yeah, look, he's not great. I mean, look, he's a fucking creep. But, look at what he's going to do. Look at what he has done. And yeah, I think that obviously the polling is not in his favor, but when you see that it's like 9 points up, I'm like, I'd take away about 5 of those. I just feel like, it's just way off, because we've talked about it many times on this show. If you are a Trump voter and somebody you don't know calls and asks how you're voting, a lot of you aren't going to want to say that. You're just like, it's not really their business. I don't need the headache. I don't want to get into a fight on the phone. I'm trying to make dinner, that sort of a thing. So I
So you think it's higher than what the polling says?
I think Trump is. I think it's much closer. I think that people will just say that they're voting for Biden. I do believe that he's behind because Trump is acting like he's behind. So I've said on this show that I think the internal numbers are not in his favor, because if he had his polls and he was fine, I don't think that this week would have looked like that at all, actually.
Right.
And also I think if they'd gone first and the Democrats were next week, I do think we would have seen. So they knew what they were able to do. And, when you had the widow speak about her husband who was killed in some of the rioting, you have really effective speakers like that, and I think that those human stories are what go a long way. And I think that it's not that Democrats didn't do a good job of it, but these were the moments that I think really stood out. I think if you love Trump, last night was amazing because he did all of his Trump things, and you don't think about the fact, I mean, the 1,500 suck-ups there on the White House lawn, they laughed at all the jokes, even the one about Biden giving you hugs and kisses. Sure, that was pretty funny. But, in general, you just had it was like the good one, boss, So I think that it was certainly interesting to see. But what I do want to shift towards is the sort of the immediate reaction to the people who attended this. You've seen videos now circulating for people who were leaving the White House afterwards. There was no police presence there, and they were accosted by protesters, including Rand Paul, who said that if he did have police with him, and he said that if he didn't, he's not sure that he would have survived the interaction. And I think those are the sorts of things that when these are the people these are obviously not people from the Democratic Party. I get that. But this is what you're able to see is like, this is what you're doing. You're like, you're not just yelling and insulting. You're like threatening people that are leaving this Trump rally. So I think that these are the sorts of things that should Trump win, it's going to be a lot of this. It's like, you know what? They're just not being pleasant about anything. They're so angry, and there's a lot to be angry about. But, when you see average, everyday Americans walking away from any event and people are accosting them in the street, I think that rubs people the wrong way. But I don't, and look, that's like a small little isolated thing. It's just videos that I was looking at this morning. I think the bigger picture
Do you
is,
believe Rand Paul? Do you think that he actually would not have survived had he not, whatever he said, had he not had protection? He really would have been in danger.
No, I think that whatever that is on his head, it's a thin polymer of kryptonite. So I do believe he's impervious to most harm. But look, the guy couldn't even survive an altercation with his next door neighbor. So clearly he's not as tough as the old man. Ron Paul, I think, could have survived anything. There'd be a nuclear blast next to Ron Paul and he'd be like, all right, well, let me tell you what the government's doing. But I don't know. I mean, I think that these things, I feel like we're not going to get less of them over the next 3 months. And, you're going to see a lot more of this narrative, and it's very easy to paint the picture. I don't know. What do you think, Scott, about, yes, sort of these incidents that I'm talking about, these run-ins, but just sort of this portrayal of like, well, look what is happening in these democratic cities. Look what they're doing to people that just went to go see the president speak. How effective is it's not even just the law and order. It's just like, yeah, we are nicer than they are, don't you think? Just sort of painting with that brush.
Well, yes, it's a very effective strategy, and that's why they're doing that. Just to go back a little bit from the White House, because when he ended that speech, I just have to say the visuals of seeing him with his family up there at the White House felt very much like a South American dictatorship. It was just a very odd juxtaposition, and it really kind of grossed me out at the end when they were looking at the fireworks. I'm like, here's his entire family, and almost every single one of them spoke, and they're up there, and you just imagine like, oh, here's the dictator, and all we needed was the sash and everything. So it was very weird imagery, but yes, I think it's an effective strategy. But on the flip side of that, I think what's going to be difficult to be able to ride that strategy all the way back. Again, he's just hoping to get a few of these suburban people that are scared by seeing this imagery. But it still goes back to, you're the current president right now. And this was a Nixonian thing that he used in 1968 when he was running for president the first time and saying, hey, I will go ahead and put law and order in if you vote for me. The problem is Trump is already president, and a lot of these issues have been exacerbated by his own policies. And the problem is, it's hard to now say the incumbent is the one that can fix these issues when they're happening on his watch. Now, granted, he keeps also pushing on, look, I'll bring the National Guard in, and he'll tweet like, look, the National Guard came in and absolutely nothing happened down Kenosha thanks to me and the National Guard. Now Portland should do the same thing. When he tries to push that up saying, yes, I will restore law and order if you let me, but the Democrats are not letting me, it is going to be an effective strategy. However, in the real world, a lot of people see that a lot of these issues started with him. And it's the same thing that goes back to the economy too. We acted like, again, we had the best economy ever because of me. And, it was only because of the China virus, which he actually said in the speech yesterday. Only because of that and because of them that we're in this situation, but I will build it back again. But again, people in the real world see differently, and the stock market is so disjointed from the everyday things that are happening in the everyday pocketbooks of Americans that, those people are going to look and say, wait, am I better off than I was 4 years ago? I don't think so. And you see the chaos around, you see the chaos in the city in the streets, and you realize like, yes, this is the person that's running the country right now. So he was trying to pin it as like, he was not the incumbent and he was running against an incumbent in a weird way, saying Joe Biden's been in there for 47 years and done nothing. And it was a weird kind of juxtaposition of being like, I'm the incumbent and I'm going to fix everything, but I'm not, because Joe Biden's been there for 47 years and I'll go in and make sure this stuff doesn't happen. So they were trying to, have it both ways in there, which was a little bit disjointed. But at the end of the day, I think most people are going to see what it is in the real world and not this fantasy picture that they were trying to paint last night and this week.
What do you think, Tamra, how effective it is to sort of, be the, just look at what's going on, on the news? I mean, you could have a picture in a picture of, rioting happening, not just in Kenosha, and just be like, yeah, look, this is what's happening in the country right now. Reelect me and somehow I'll have more power and I'll be able to stop it.
I hope that Scott is right. I hope that people are able, anybody that is undecided or anybody that is moderate, is thinking but you've been in charge these last few years, and this is what's happened. You know, it is able to look at it through that lens. I'm hoping that that's the case. I fear that it's not. Like, I fear that people are lazy enough to be spoon-fed everything that they were spouting, and that their actions, I mean, almost every single statement this entire week directly negated what they said. How many people said Trump accomplished everything he said he was going to accomplish? He accomplished pretty much nothing that he said he was going to accomplish. They talked about how much how he's created more jobs than any president ever. He created jobs, but not any more than the previous 3 presidents did in their first terms. If I'm hoping that anybody who is undecided is able to actually, you know, think about cause and effect and look at it critically, and realize that, like, yeah, sure, you can say I'm the greatest person in the world, but does that mean that I'm the greatest person in the world? Look at what is actually happening. And I tweeted, the thing that struck me is that, one of the things that struck me is that every single person, you can't just say, Trump did a great job with the economy. He did the best job of any president ever of all time. I think it was Herman
I saw that
Cain.
tweet.
Yeah, Herman Cain says that he is the most pro-life president of all time. Like, why do they constantly have? They can't just say he's tough on immigration. He improved jobs in certain demographics. Like, it has to be the best of all time.
Well, yeah, and that was something that that I was talking about Frank Luntz. That's what he said. It's like he has to take it to that level. He has to say, "I'm the best president for African Americans since Abraham Lincoln," completely ignoring what LBJ did. Like, you just have to come up with one.
And
it's like you can just say, "I did really good for these people." No, it has to be, "I'm the best," or "the best since Lincoln." Huh? Remember him? He's on your money, you know?
Well, I'm hoping that if these undecided voters are thinking critically, I'm hoping that they're like, why does he always have to be the best of all time? You know who does that? A 5th grader who's trying to tell his teacher that he did his book report. Not only did I do my book report, I stayed up all night and I did the best book report that I worked harder than I've ever done. You know, like, oh, I think somebody's doth protest too much. You know what I mean? Like, the absolute intensity seems to give you a pause on how true this statement is.
Yeah, I think that that there's obviously that level of it, and the base loves all of that, and they're like, yeah, no, he's really the best ever. I did think it's interesting that you referenced Herman Cain, because there was an ongoing conversation on Twitter about the attendees at last night's speech, how they were not social distance, how they were not wearing masks. And people said, there were kind of your stock responses. It was like, Bill, because it's a hoax, or because the media blows it up. And then there was just one response was, where was Herman Cain tonight? And not laughing about Herman Cain being dead, but there is the
Did I say Herman Cain?
You did. He came up.
I made the mistake.
No.
It wasn't Herman Cain who said that.
That's all right. It just reminded me of something that I saw. But the funniest thing was, and I was telling Tamra about this ahead of time, was before we got started, the fact that that Melania wore that lime green chroma key dress. If you thought that there was a chance that the internet would have fun with that dress, they did. Anything you can imagine being, posted onto that dress. My favorite, well, there's 2. I think there's a great one that is Trump with Jeffrey Epstein, and then another one is Paul Manafort's mugshot. But there's so many. I don't want to sell any of them short, because there were so many. So
yeah, that was the first thing I thought of after I was like, oh, it's kind of an interesting color, and I'm like, oh, because then it reminded me of the time when the Queen wore that same color, kind of green,
right.
and they're putting all these crazy things on her dress too. I was like,
Yeah.
really? Okay, I cannot wait to see if the internet's going to come through, because they always do.
But the best moment of the whole night was another thing that a lot of people have posted, was when Melania is interacting with Ivanka, and she has this huge smile, and then the second Ivanka is moving on to the next person, she just has like the most exaggerated, like cartoony eye roll that you've ever seen, and you're just like, oh yeah, she does hate her, doesn't she? She really hates her. So and I'm like, that's what I tuned in for, was that.
Yeah.
Anyway, so it'll remain to be seen. Trump said that the ratings were great last night. The fast overnights were not. To be fair, they are better than the NBA right now. I wanted to make the joke that the ratings for the NBA were better than for the RNC, but actually they're not. So he was right about that. So they were not as good as his own convention, and not as good as the DNC. And again, that's what matters to him. I did want to talk about, obviously there'll be plenty of campaigning over the next 6 weeks, but what we're going to start to focus on now are these debates. Nancy Pelosi saying something that I expected somebody to say probably much sooner than this, but I don't even think Biden should debate him. I wouldn't legitimize this president with a conversation. Nancy saying that immediately took it in, was spun as, well, Biden's scared and he doesn't want to talk to him. And so I don't know how much Biden appreciates Pelosi saying that, unless he really doesn't want to talk to him. So what do you think, Tamra, about Nancy Pelosi putting this idea out there that they shouldn't even have debates?
I think it's too little too late. If you're going to say we shouldn't act this way because that legitimizes him, you should have started that in 2017. We should have not focused on his tweets so much, because that legitimizes them. And, all of the other ridiculous things. I think at this point you're saying, let's not do X, Y, or Z because it legitimizes him. I think now you're saying that? That's too little too late. And you got to have a debate. And the debate is going to be in Biden and Kamala's favor. So who amongst us three right here does not want to see the debates?
Yeah, but again, this is one of those ones where the VP debate is that's the main event. But because I don't imagine. I imagine neither Trump nor Biden being particularly not having a strong night, but Trump not even being able to lean on the 1,500 people he had last night, I think will go a long way. But what's the next corn pop story we're going to get out of old? He's not Sleepy Joe anymore. Somebody pointed out to me that he's Slow Joe now.
Slow Joe.
So he's not Sleepy Joe anymore. So he's awake. He's just not fast.
I think that it's absolutely the wrong tack for Nancy Pelosi to say that, because what happens is it plays right back into Republicans and Trump's side, that Biden's not mentally prepared and he's not capable of being sharp for the debate. So by saying that Biden should not debate Trump, that plays right into their hands. And as Tamra said, it's too late. We know that they're two old men, and we know that neither one of them are going to be strong, and there's going to be moments for both of them that are not going to be particularly good. And that in general, we've talked about this for months, it would probably be best if both of them agreed not to debate. Really, the marquee event again is the VP debate on October 7th, but all the rest of the stuff is just going to be who's going to be less embarrassing. And but on the other side of that, the bar is now so low that it will be able to give a Trump, voter, if he has a particularly good night, to say, oh look, he won, or same thing with Biden, oh look, he did okay. And really debates don't matter like they used to, because a lot of times those were the only times that Americans really got to see their presidential candidates was through these debates, because they were not seeing them like we do now, doing their their speeches and their campaign rallies in the same way that they can now. So that was their only time. Now people really, it doesn't matter. I mean, look, Donald Trump lost every single debate handedly in 2016, and that didn't really matter. So at the end of the day, I think a lot of this stuff is going to go right back to where it was. We're a very split country, and it's really just going to go down to about 6 states and who's going to be able to get those few people over, which is why the Republicans, again, were trying to do all they could in the convention to peel just a few of those voters from each demographic to try to eke out another win again. And that's all they care about. It's just 270 electoral votes. They don't even need to get as much as they did last time. So
yeah,
that's all they do.
Yeah, I mean, look, either side, if you can guarantee you're going to get 1 vote to win in all of the states you need, like, great. I don't need 2 votes. I just need that 1. So if that's what we're going for, let's go with that.
And it makes it easier too, because if Donald Trump wants to go back and say, look, this was rigged or whatever, if it's a very tight election, you have more ability to recount and try to change things. If it's a landslide win for Biden, there's less of an opportunity for Donald Trump to be able to go back and say, okay, this election was rigged and we need to, fight every single vote there. So their other plan is just to eke out that win like 2016 so they can still feel like they can win. So even if they lose.
Yeah, and look, there's a legitimate reason for the Trump campaign to be wary of him actually sitting down for these debates. It's a little bit less than what people who don't like Trump would think, but I would say, like never before, the moderators of these debates they all are going to have it in for Trump, and I think they're going to ask Biden some tough questions, but they're really looking forward to what they're going to be able to put Trump on the hot seat for. And I also suspect that if there are debates, and I do think that there will be debates, I think after the first one, Trump is going to talk about how unfairly he was treated and try not to do any more of them. But we'll of course see with that.